This is a classic American dream tech story. It's 1994 and you're a very successful investment banker on Wall Street. In fact, you're reputed to be the only senior vice president on a 5-figure salary. But you're intrigued by one statistic, a statistic that others don't find particularly interesting, but it keeps you awake at night. The World Wide Web is growing by 2,300% a month. Boom! Jeff Bezos of Amazon saw the future and the possibility of selling directly to consumers via the internet. He quit his job and moved lock, stock and barrel with his family to a place in Seattle and started up his company in a garage with 5 other people. Now that's a very brave thing to do, even if subsequently you're declared a genius. Well, you acquire this mega Whole Foods chain with its 460 units in the US and Canada and its 9 stores like these here in the UK. Amazon is increasingly now doing to grocery what it has done to books, entertainment, electricals, clothing and the like. Whilst no stranger to making acquisitions, this is the biggest takeover deal in Amazon's history and it's turned heads. The bid for Whole Foods stands at a whopping $13.4 billion and expect that to rise should anyone else enter the party. Jeff Bezos' Amazon is the largest internet-based retailer in the world by total sales and market share. From USB cables to Kindle readers and even the talking personal assistant Alexa, Amazon sells it all. From Amazon Basics to Amazon Prime, Bezos keeps his company consumer focused. Whether it's your shopping, your entertainment and streaming, your reading, and even controlling your home in an Internet Things of age, Amazon is ambitious. It wants to expand the way that the brand is connected to its customers by being an indispensable part of your life. These connections are allowing it to suck up an extraordinary amount of data about everyday facets of its customers' lives. Make no mistake about it, Amazon is primarily a data company, and it's data that is the magic elixir, if you'd excuse the pun, that lifts and separates it from its retail competitors. Amazon is a world tech giant, one of our very own WPP BrandZ Top 100 Most Valuable Global Brands, fearsome 5. Google, Apple, Microsoft, Amazon and then Facebook, in that order, account for a quarter of the value of the brands in the BrandZ Top 100 Most Valuable Global Brands for 2017. Although Apple was the #1 brand in the BrandZ Top 100 Most Valuable Global Brands for 2017, Amazon was the fastest riser. It's now brand #4 with a brand value of $139 billion US, and this year it rose a massive 41%. Jeff Bezos is chairman, president and chief executive officer of Amazon. He's also a self-professed digital disruptor, from online shopping to cloud computing and now Whole Foods stores. His operating income in 2016 was nearly $136 billion, with a net profit of just $2.4 billion. But remember, Amazon didn't even make a profit until 2001. He has uniquely managed to convince Wall Street that Amazon should be held to different financial performance measures than other stocks they hold. Such is the persuasive nature of the man. But it's not the core retailing side of the business that's delivering profit growth. This is coming from Amazon's cloud computing business, Amazon Web Services. This unit is substantially more profitable, with no physical products to buy, store and ship. But while its growth is decelerating, its revenue still grew 43% over this year to $3.7 billion. That helps the bottom line a lot. Yet Jeff Bezos cares more about cash flow than he does about net income. And he's smart about it. This is where Amazon as a business model is at its most lethal. Amazon isn't looking to sit on the money it washes through its treasury. It's looking to spend it on investments like new warehouses, more Alexa-powered products, and original video programming. This will create for it the next chasm, separating it from the competition over the next decade. In a number of ways, Amazon is so far ahead of its nearest competitor that it's solved problems that they haven't even realised are problems yet. And this is what should frighten its competitors. Perhaps the ones not frightened are those in China. If you really want to see the future of e-commerce and the mix of online to offline, you need to study what's going on here in China, with the world's most digitally connected consumers, in the world's largest e-commerce market. Bezos still owns the URL relentless.com. That was the original name of the company, and to this very day it still redirects people to Amazon.com, the name he eventually gave the company in 1995. He was going to call it Cadabra, but so many people kept mispronouncing it, he decided that probably wasn't a great idea. Why books? The list of 20 goods that Bezos thought could be sold online got narrowed down to 5 most promising products, which included CDs and videos, that then got whittled down to just one: books. Here's a few of Jeff Bezos' own choice sayings. Focus on the long term and being the market leader rather than short-term profitability, a mantra he has steadfastly stuck to. It's still day one. Day one is the name of the Seattle building Bezos works in. Day two is stasis, followed by irrelevance, followed by excruciatingly painful decline, followed by death. And that's why it's always day one. He wrote to shareholders in January 2017. Our vision is to become the world's most consumer-centric company, where customers can come to find anything they want to buy online. His Whole Foods acquisition will help him achieve that. Amazon had a controversial start, with booksellers right around the world complaining they were putting them out of business. And retailers similarly challenged Amazon's web superiority and the amount of tax that they pay. And there are fears now that the same thing might well happen in the grocery sector as well. As I wrote and broadcast in our WPP store, The History of Retail in 100 Objects, the cash register was invented by James Ritty so that he could prevent staff from pilfering cash and hear for himself when a sale had been made. But that was back in 1879, and shopping has been through a number of revolutions since. Now the unimaginable is about to happen, and it's Bezos who has imagined it again. Just 7 months ago, Amazon opened its first Go store in Seattle to its employees. It uses sensors to show what's been purchased and automatically charges a shopper's account as they walk out of the store. There are no checkouts. More Go stores will be rolled out soon. It's already tested its futuristic drone delivery service with a 13-minute delivery to a house in Cambridge. That may mean ordering Prime from Whole Foods is likely to mean your groceries are delivered quickly, and who knows, these stores may go cashless in the future too. Bezos is in a space race with that other great technological giant, Elon Musk's SpaceX. But whether the Bezos effect will get his space company, Blue Origin, to beat his rivals, which also includes Richard Branson's Virgin Galactic, remains to be seen. But for now, one of the world's greatest dreamers-in-chief has almost got liftoff with his acquisitions of Whole Foods. But will Whole Foods brand's positioning give Amazon the credibility in fresh and natural that it lacked? Will Walmart launch a counterbid for Whole Foods? Will other retailers most impacted, such as Kroger, Target, Costco, fight their territory? How will this shake-up affect retailing as we know it? And will the mighty Chinese e-commerce players play a more aggressive overseas game and rain on Amazon's parade? And will cashless Go Ready really work at speed and at scale? Or is the sky really the limit for Amazon? And discuss those questions we will. Hello, and a very warm welcome to a very special edition of In Retail Conversation. This In Retail Conversation is all about the Amazon Whole Foods potential acquisition. My name's David Roth from WPP, and it's my pleasure to be today's presenter. We've got a lot of special guests from both here from our London studio and also via video conference from New York. All of them have a particular insight in Amazon and Whole Foods, and I hope that you will enjoy their insights and what they have to say. At the end of today's broadcast, I'll give you a URL where you can download a whole series of resources that will help you understand better Amazon and Whole Foods. Well, my very first guest, aptly enough, is Amazon's Alexa herself and our Brandz Rosie application. Ask Rosie about brands.
Hello, I'm Brandz Rosie. Thanks for your interest. Can I ask your name?
David.
Nice to meet you, David. Would you like to talk about this year's Global Brands Top 100 Brands?
Yes, please.
That's great. Where would you like to start? Maybe look at a particular brand.
Tell me about Amazon.
Would you like to know about the Amazon brand performance in 2017?
Yes, please.
Amazon is positioned at number 4 with a value of $139,286. Its brand contribution is 4. Brand value percentage change 2017 versus 2016 is 41% and rank change is 3.
Thanks very much.
You are very welcome. Why not stay up to date with new BrandsBot developments as they happen and join our mailing list?
Excellent, yes.
That's great. We'll be in touch soon. Goodbye.
And our first guests are Elspeth Chong and Peter Walsh from Kantar Millwall Brown. Elspeth, Peter, thanks very much indeed for joining us. I'm going to start with you, Elspeth. You're the person who's responsible for doing the brand valuations globally around the world for the various different Brandz rankings. From a brand valuation perspective, let's take a look at both Amazon and Whole Foods.
Hi, David. So let's start with the track record first. So since we launched our first global ranking back in 2006, so over the last 12 years, Amazon has grown by more than 2,000%. And why so? It's been always a top rises. So it's been very focused on consumer-driven disruptions. And what disruptions are we talking about? I remember 1 year ago, I was still talking about one click away, we can get our orders at our doorstep in 2 hours' time. And this year, we don't even have to move our finger. We just have to say, Alexa, can we have some beach toys for my vacation next week? So this is actually the pace that Amazon has been innovating all these years, and it's reflected in their share price and also the brand value growth.
Now, brand value growth is one thing. Another way of looking at it is, I suppose, the position in the global Brandzy Top 100 Most Valuable Global Brands. This is quite a story.
That's right. So Amazon started at number 78. It dipped a little bit as it went, but now in 2017, it is the number 4 most valuable brand in our global ranking this year. And it's very interesting because with the acquisition of Whole Foods, I would think that it's going to add more value to consumers, making people's life better every day.
So if we had to push you and say, if they, in a sense, put some of those, if those two brands were put together in some way, from a consumer perspective, where would their brand be?
I have to take my crystal ball out, David. I would think that without any surprise, as they keep on their momentum, Amazon should be like one of the top 3 brands in our ranking next year.
Okay, look and watch this space. Peter, one of the great things about the Brandzy data set is we've got historic data on both of these brands going back quite some way. What does the Brandzy data set say about Amazon Whole Foods?
Well, indeed, it is a treasure trove. You know, we interviewed more than 3 million people over the last 10, 12 years. So there's some fascinating data about it. The first, I think, is the opportunity, a massive opportunity if you look at the data, which is the claimed usage across the globe where Amazon is available, which is most places, is about 2/3 of the people. Whereas for Whole Foods, it's a mere 9%. There's 3/4, more than 3/4, where Whole Foods are available who've never ever tried it. So you can see that the ability for the Amazon merger to be able to scale it up is massive.
Now, one of the things that the Brandzy data looks at is, I suppose, the relationship between brands, their value, how much they charge. Two very different brands on that scale. What do we see?
Positioning is really very, very different. Again, looking at some key metrics that we've got on Brandzy, the actual worth it score is very good for both brands. They're both worth it in their ways, but one is a really good value, relatively cheap brand from the consumer point of view, whereas the Whole Foods is a much more expensive brand because it's worth it. It justifies its premium. So what the implication of this is adding some kind of quality to the Amazon stable.
Now, one of the things that Whole Foods, I suppose, was predicated on, was founded on, was their social responsibility.
Yeah, and we see very different measures here. The social responsibility and corporate responsibility for Whole Foods has always been massively high, huge scores against the average brands. Whereas Amazon has been struggling for some time, but it's now just approaching round about the average for all brands.
Now, you have a summary metric looking at I suppose the makeup of brands across various different dimensions called vital signs. What are the vital signs of Amazon and what are the vital signs of Whole Foods, and do they match at all?
Well, indeed, these are the vital signs are of brand health, if you like. And what our data shows us, particularly Elspeth's valuation stuff, is that the brands that are most successful tend to start with a purpose. That is, the perception that they're making people's lives better. And if that then purpose is backed up by some innovation, some perceived innovation about why the brand is making your life better, and that in turn is communicated, the brand has a huge advantage. And then, of course, people are much more likely to try it. And if the experience lives up or goes beyond all of those claims, then the brand is sitting pretty, and what happens? It develops brand love, which then sustains it before its next innovation. And these measures, if you're high on all of them, you're a healthy brand, which indeed Amazon is, and if you're low on all of them, you're frail. I'm glad to say that well, Whole Foods is far from frail. It's not quite as strong as Amazon. In fact, Where it's sort of falling down is a little bit in terms of communications, so people don't necessarily get exactly what it's about. Again, the low penetration. And also, it hasn't quite developed love yet. So again, you can see that with the backing and all of the aspects that Amazon will bring to the party, this could be of benefit to Whole Foods.
Now, Amazon has, I suppose, a summary in your vital signs of analysis of about 130 odd. Where does that place it in the hierarchy of all of the brands?
Oh, it's way up the top. I mean, in fact, I think our top brand is Pampers at the moment, but Amazon is close behind in terms of that healthiness of the brand, alongside pretty close to its ranking, number 3 or 4 from memory.
So, in summary then, Peter, when we look at from a brand perspective, Amazon, Whole Foods, what does that bring?
Well, I think this is a match made in heaven. There's something in it for both parties. And you can see that the massive opportunity that could be globalized and scaled more for the expansion of quality fresh goods at a more acceptable and affordable price for the benefit of consumers is what this merger could all be about. So both parties will gain for that. And in fact, what's interesting, when you look again at the BrandZ data, both brands are led by 2 key metrics: brand purpose and innovation. And those are the 2 aspects that lead most to future brand growth and sustainability.
Well, Peter and Elspeth, thank you very much indeed. Now, there's a lot more BrandZ data that's available to you that looks at various different aspects of both the Amazon brand and the Whole Food brands. And at the end of this broadcast, I'll be giving you a URL where you can download all of that data and the reports that we've specifically created for you. Well, I'm joined via video conference from New York by John Bird, who's the Executive Director for Retail of VML. John, thanks very much indeed for joining us.
Thank you.
Slightly earlier you went onto the streets of New York near your office, which also happens to be very near one of the biggest grossing Whole Foods stores, and also a new Amazon bookstore. So let's hear what the hardy New Yorkers had to say.
I think it's great for Amazon. They don't traditionally have retail locations, right? So for them to have actual storefronts will be a huge step forward for Amazon as a company. In addition to breaking into the food space a little bit more, right now Amazon has Amazon Fresh and pantry boxes, but I think that the type of food that Whole Foods offers will bring a lot to Amazon as a company.
It'll make shopping for groceries it'll make it easier, and I don't usually shop for groceries, so when I do, it's like a big trip out, and if it can make it easier for me, that's great.
The internet's going to be putting out a lot of companies out of business. It's going to be putting them in a bad situation. That's just what's happening.
We don't shop anymore. We do everything online.
Yeah, I try to avoid stores at all costs. So I think it's going to happen regardless. And I mean, they're just getting on the forefront, so good for them.
I think the jury's still out on whether or not it's a good or bad thing. It's obviously a shakeup in the market in terms of buying produce or whatever it is from the supermarket. So I'm not exactly sure what the difference is, because I mean, we live in New York, so it's a little bit different than if you were living in more of a suburban or rural area.
I'm eager to kind of participate and see, because in my neighborhood we don't have a lot of like good neighborhoods where we can get good food, so I feel like it'll help target healthier eating in my neighborhood.
It would be cool if Amazon did like the Amazon groceries, but with Whole Foods, like their actual like food and like available like items.
The amount of data that Amazon will collect on all of us will be even more than it is right now, which is something interesting to think about.
If they put the money behind it and they stay, like they farm locally, I think that'd be really awesome. You know, if they can stay local, I think that'd be great.
I think maybe having the name Amazon partner with another big name, Whole Foods, will sort of change the way that the industry works.
Other grocery stores will have to compete price-wise, speed in getting groceries to you. I mean, just the way that Amazon has really changed how people buy everyday home goods, it looks like they could do that with food as well, so everybody else will have to kind of step up to compete.
So John, overall, pretty positive reception.
Yeah, we were surprised that there wasn't any of the negativity that showed up in social media with some fringe groups anyway, or fringe fans of Whole Foods who were worried about Amazon. But definitely when we were on the streets of New York, outside Columbus Circle, the shops at Columbus Circle with Whole Foods in the basement and Amazon on the third floor, it was overwhelmingly positive. People thought it was a great thing. It would be a great thing for retail, and it'd be a great thing for Whole Foods to bring those two brands together.
Now, John, talking about retail in general, and I suppose the fusing of those two worlds, the virtual world and the physical world. I mean, it is possible to go to all those stores near your office, visit them all, and not actually realise we were in a digital world at all.
Yeah, yeah, it is. It is amazing, isn't it? In 2017, that a lot of retail really hasn't caught up. I think that is changing, though. You know, I think there's been a lack of investment in bringing physical retail into the digital world, and perhaps a lack of skill in some traditional retail organisations. But there's an incredible amount of focus on it now. And do
you think that the Amazon Whole Foods acquisition, if it takes place, is going to quicken the pace of that happening?
Yeah, it will. It will accelerate things. Already, the clients that I speak with are looking at how to pick up the pace. I mean, they can see the Amazonizing of US retail and also other markets around the world, but definitely here. And the challenge is on to pick up the pace and correct course.
Now, John, there's a major assumption, really, that Amazon is going to be a rip-rolling success. They don't really know much about physical stores at all. What do they know about retailing?
Well, they know a lot about retailing. I mean, they are one of the big success stories in retail overall over the last 20 years, if not the biggest success in the US. You're right, they don't know a lot about physical retail. They've got half a dozen stores. They've got a couple of experiments in Seattle, which are interesting experiments. But, you know, that's why they bought Whole Foods, to get into grocery, but also to expand their physical footprint. And instantly overnight, they get access to 460 additional locations, plus a lot of knowledge about how to run physical stores. And then if you can bring their skill in removing friction from the shopping experience with Whole Foods' skill in understanding grocery and the logistics of physical retail, well, that should be, that makes a lot of sense.
Well, John Bird from VML, for the moment, thank you very much. We'll be back with you a little bit later on.
Thanks, David.
Well, I'm now joined by Michael Ross, who is the founder and chief scientist of Dynamic Action and a long-time Amazon follower. Michael, thanks very much indeed for joining us.
David, good to be here.
Very daft question, but I'm going to ask you it anyway. What is Amazon?
No, David, I think it's a fantastic question. I think it's probably such an easy question to gloss over, and I think as consumers, obviously, we think of Amazon as a retailer. But Amazon is much more than that, and given that in the UK, as an example, they're carrying in excess of 100 million SKUs, they're not a retailer in any traditional sense of the word. I think of Amazon much more as a commerce platform, and when one thinks about the things that they offer in terms of their marketplace, Amazon Web Services, the services from a fulfillment perspective. They're also a brand owner. They're also increasingly a movie studio. So, but at the core of them, they're a platform provider that is then able to sort of offer various bits and pieces to anyone who wants them. And they have lots of clever reinforcing loops that make that platform ever stickier.
Given that they are as diverse of that, what is it that drives a common behaviour across all of it?
So I think there are a few themes that maybe help understand how Amazon think. I think at the core is a relentless focus on the customer, and whether that customer is an end consumer or whether it's a consumer of Amazon Web Services, they've got a particular obsession about consumers.
But many companies says they're consumer obsessed. What is it? I mean,
and I think that's the point. I think
many
many customers say it, and I think Amazon really lives and breathes it. It's deep in their DNA. When they think about new products, the first thing they do is write the press release, how they would explain it to customers. And I think, let me give you some other examples about this customer centricity. Metrics and what you measure and what you talk about are fundamental to how businesses live and think. Amazon, from the get-go, from 20 years ago, it always measured things that were important to customers. So I work with lots of retailers that talk about availability and talk about their deliveries on time in full. Amazon talks about page-weighted availability. Are they in stock of the products customers are looking at? It's a customer view of availability. They talk about delivery on promise, which is a customer view of delivery. And they are relentless about understanding where are they failing customers and then doing something about it. So I think that's one thing that drives them. I think the second thing that's important is a very long-term view. Many of their investments are taking a 10, 15, 20-year view, both on consumer profitability, but also on the dynamics of retail. So understanding how different categories might migrate in the very long term online, so they're willing to take very big long-term bets that I think other typical public companies aren't able to do.
Now we saw in the film that Jeff has managed to persuade the street to judge their metrics completely differently to any other company on the planet. How's he done that?
Well, that's the greatest trick that he's pulled off. I think it was always when, in the early days of Amazon, when they were losing huge amounts of money, the Bezos fixation was not to run out of cash. And I think that's another key theme of Amazon. They deeply understand how they make money at a profit per customer, profit per SKU basis, and also what generates cash. And a lot of their activities lose money but generate cash, given their cash flow model. So I think the cleverness that Amazon has pulled off is persuading the street that they deeply understand what activities make and lose money, how they generate cash, and then they can take a very long-term view. And that's probably something that, again, Bezos has done an extraordinary job and has obviously very, very supportive shareholders.
Now, do you view this potential takeover as a wake-up call to the industry, that Amazon's out to sell us everything?
Well, I think retailers should have had a wake-up call many years ago. I fear many pressed the snooze button. This has been going on for a long time, and I think this is just the next, although albeit a big line in the sand. I think one of my observations is, you've seen online penetration go category by category. Online gets a bigger and bigger share. But it's also very clear that retail is here to stay. People like physical stores, people want to experience things, particularly in food, they want to test and prod. So I think what this does is recognise that the future of retail is very much omni-channel, whatever you want to call it. There's going to be multiple ways to engage with things. And I think that the wake-up call is that, whatever category and whatever you're doing, Amazon is an absolutely key both competitor if you're competing with Amazon, but equally if you're not competing with Amazon, it sets the bar for the experience.
Now, many companies, when they announce a takeover or merger, talk about the synergies that are going to get between putting the two things together. Are there really any synergies between these two, or is this just a gigantic field experiment?
Again, it's an interesting question. I mean, I think probably a couple of thoughts on this. I know Amazon have become increasingly selective of what they acquire. They're acquiring when they're going into either markets they don't understand or to buy into supply chains that are very challenging to build from first principles. And I think grocery is probably the most complex supply chain, long brand relationships, and I think that buying into Whole Foods gives them access to a supply chain, a set of branded relationships that it would otherwise take many, many years for them to build themselves. But I think the second thing is we all understand that you know, when Amazon is selling direct to consumer, they understand the true end-to-end economics of every item they sell, and the last mile delivery is a critical piece of the jigsaw. A big percentage, I think now 30+% of all items that deliver by Amazon in the UK are now delivered by their own couriers, but they're constantly trying to eke out penny savings. And my hunch is that different delivery models, and particularly click and collect, where things are delivered to where the consumer is doing some of the work themselves and picking up, will be a really important part of the, should we say, the sort of long range, how this world plays out. So I think having in the US, I think they've got 800 stores, will be a very interesting experiment for them to work out how do they get the right balance of direct to home versus store delivery.
Now, one of the things that Amazon has been a pioneer of is artificial intelligence in one form or another. We can suppose that they'll be bringing those skills to Whole Foods as well. Is this the dawn of artificial intelligence now being used in physical retail as well?
Again, it's a very interesting question. When, you know, AI is one of the worst defined terms in the world at the moment, so I try not to sort of use it bluntly. I see a big spectrum of things in the sort of AI world, from simple process automation at one extreme, which is one, you know, simple AI, to, you know, deep neural nets and the sort of things they're doing in Alexa and image recognition that is clearly at the sort of super clever machine learning end. And there's a lot of stuff in the middle. And I'd say a lot of the things that Amazon have done very cleverly with, say, price automation and optimization and supply chain and replenishment pricing and optimization is, should we say, the sort of the basics of AI that all retailers will need to be doing in due course. And I think the reason is that every retailer I'm talking to needs to become more efficient. You know, you see the pressure on overheads, desire to take employees out, but at the same time, they're having to work cleverer. They're having to take much more surgical actions. And the only way to do that is to get the machines to do some of the work. And I think one of the insights I've had recently from Amazon is that they're now training their managers to manage hybrid teams of humans and AI. So that I think of AI will be the new employee of the future, and people will get used to operating in hybrid worlds where the humans should do what the humans are good at and let the machines do
where human rhythms meet algorithms.
Where human rhythms meet algorithms. Beautiful.
Michael Ross, thank you very much, Steve, for joining us.
Thank you, David.
Well, I'm now joined by Brian Gildenberg via the old-fashioned telephone. Brian is the Chief Knowledge Officer for Kantar Retail. Brian, thanks very much indeed for joining us.
Thanks for the invitation, and sorry I couldn't be in front of the camera or live in person somewhere. So.
Well, Whole Foods, Brian, it's been losing market share for the past 3 years. It's got a pretty poor price perception when price is at the top of the customer agenda. Its core differentiation, organic, is very much being usurped by competitors. Its shareholders have been openly agitating for change and accusing the management about lots of things, including taking outrageously large spaces at stratospheric rents. This is a problematic business, isn't it? So why is Amazon acquiring it, and what's all the fuss about, Brian?
Well, I think they're I think they're acquiring it for two reasons. One, problematic businesses, provided that their core value proposition is still relatively strong. We'll come back to that in a second. But problematic businesses tend to be cheaper than non-problematic ones. So that's there's a good bit there. I think the problems with Whole Foods, and they are real, and Jana, the activist investor, got involved in that business and was obviously disruptive enough to provoke the sale. The interesting thing is when we look at the Whole Foods challenge, the Whole Foods challenge in reality isn't with the shopper that loves Whole Foods. So if you look at what's happened to Whole Foods shopper frequency, they are still deriving they still have a very strong business with people that love that format. So there are people that are still deeply loyal to it. The challenge that Whole Foods has, and the point that you made implicitly there is at the root of it, which is that conventional retailers have gotten better at selling things that Whole Foods sold on the organic side, which has allowed the conventional retailers to pick off the occasional Whole Foods shopper. And if you look at the geographies in which Whole Foods competes, the conventional retailers that have done the best job of that are, to some degree, Kroger on the West Coast, but the retailer that's done a really good job of getting after them is Costco. Costco very quietly sells more organic food in the United States than Whole Foods does.
Which I think Brian would surprise a lot of people. Actually, Costco are a big organic player.
They're huge, and Costco's probably done more to bring organic food to a larger audience than any other single entity in the world. Just in terms of the improvements that they've made to the organic supply chain, the drive that they've had with organic farmers to make that more efficient, that opens up a whole separate can of worms around whether industrial scale organic farming is what consumers really perceive as organic farming. Different issue. Coming back to this, so I think what Amazon saw is a business that, one, has a relatively strong core proposition that delights customers, and I think this is something you need to keep in mind when you think about other businesses or brick-and-mortar formats that Amazon might buy. I mean, the Walgreens Rite Aid deal in the U.S. fell apart today, and I've already seen people say, oh, well, Amazon's going to swoop in and buy Rite Aid. No, they're not. Amazon doesn't want to buy a broken business. Bezos said this about 4 times in 15 minutes, and he's talking about the acquisition. They're going to buy a business that delights customers, right? And Whole Foods still delights customers. They delight fewer of them than they used to, and they are not as good at the moderate user. I think what Amazon saw is a real opportunity to fix that by being able to, down the road, integrate a Whole Foods premium shopping experience with a more conventional Amazon shopping experience into something more seamless and integrated, where the shopper basically gets to choose where they want to trade up and trade down in a pretty interesting way.
Now, in that scenario, Brian, are we going to see Whole Foods prices decrease? I mean, it's a very margin-rich mix, and Jeff Bezos has said many a time that he's never heard a customer ask to pay more for a product.
I think you will see Amazon try to figure out how to bring some of Whole Foods prices to a point where they can where it's got broader appeal. The thing you got to remember about Whole Foods is only 12% of Americans shop in Whole Foods every year, and only 9% shop there every month. So you've got, it's a relatively niched proposition. So only the other 12% number, only 12% of Amazon shoppers shop at Whole Foods every month. So there's a real opportunity to democratize the Whole Foods value proposition. And I think, yes, I do think you'll see Amazon be more aggressive on pricing. At the same time, I don't think they're going to crash pricing on the businesses. I just don't think that makes any sense. I really don't think that, and I just don't think they have to do that.
Now, many FMCG brands, Brian, have been, as you know, have been sitting on the fence about should they supply Amazon, shouldn't they supply Amazon, do they do it indirectly or directly? It was only last week, I think, that Nike agreed to supply Amazon direct. Are we going to see brand owners and manufacturers needing to fundamentally change their Amazon strategy and relationship with them?
When I think of FMCG brands, I think of like Ariel rather than Nike. And I think for those companies that this ship has sailed, they're all directly selling to Amazon, and they're all trying to figure out how to work within the Amazon context to manage their third-party selling as well. So I think you see a lot of companies approaching Amazon, both first-party and third-party. There's a lot of strategic advantages to that. I think the notion that you're going to be able to exclude Amazon from your distribution network, I think is going to confine itself to a few very specific niche brands that have a strong direct-to-consumer platform. I think if you're a business that sells things, particularly in the United States, to consumers through retail, not selling to Amazon is, I don't think, a viable strategy long term.
Now, Brian, you often say that retailers have a 6-week plans, 18 months promotional planning calendar, yet a 10 to 15 year sort of real estate models. Do you think that this potential acquisition is going to change the way in which retailers need to think about their business planning?
I would add something to that, which I think Amazon's got a 10 to 15 year idea of where they want to be, and that's sort of the Bezos level decisions. And then they have like 6-hour level decision processes, which are the things the algorithm solves. The gap that Amazon uses to bridge that isn't a promotional calendar or things like that. They're actually much more short term on a lot of that stuff than a brick and mortar retailer would be, because their technology allows them to react faster. I think the one big platform that you'll see retailers need to think about, because this is how Amazon approaches things, is I think you're going to see retailers need to adopt something that looks more like a tech company's product roadmap, which is a systemic strategy towards how we are going to continuously improve the customer experience. And that's the advantage that I think tech companies have brought to this, which is a really disciplined approach to customer experience enhancement that's multi-year in nature, but fluid enough that they can change as situations move and arise. But I think all of the great tech companies, Amazon, Google, Facebook, and Apple, are all very disciplined about product roadmap. And I think you'll see retailers need to think of an experience and store roadmap that's much more disciplined and proactive rather than sort of reactive and firefighty. So yes, I do think you're going to see, I think good retailers are going to be able to be less reactive and more proactive going forward, yeah.
And finally, Brian, how frightened do you think the grocery sector should be about this development?
I think in the U.S. specifically, because I do think that though Amazon's a national retailer, Whole Foods really isn't. Whole Foods is a deeply urban, suburban, upmarket regional retailer. I think the retailers that compete directly with Whole Foods should probably be concerned fairly quickly. And in the U.S., that's the Ahold Delhaize business on the East Coast, as well as some of the regionals, and then it's Kroger, Safeway, and Costco on the West Coast. Yes, I do think that what Amazon's going to be able to do in terms of plugging Whole Foods into its economic engine, whereby they don't need to make anywhere near as much margin out of the selling business of Whole Foods as Whole Foods did to be viable. I do think that they are going to get very aggressive from a pricing point of view in store, and I think they are going to accelerate the development of Amazon Fresh using Whole Foods as a flagship to give them credibility in perishables, which they lacked. And I do think you're going to see them accelerate Fresh now much more quickly through a combination of being able to shop the Whole Foods store and being able to deliver to home. And I think there'll be a click and collect component to it as well, but I think that's probably overplayed. So
well, Brian
yes.
Brian Gildenberg from Kantar Retail Chief Knowledge Officer. That's a lot of food for thought. Thank you very much indeed for joining us.
So it's organic food for thought. Thanks for listening.
You're watching a very special edition of In Retail Conversation, all about the Amazon and Whole Foods acquisition. And I'm now joined in the studio here in London by Malcolm Pinkerton, who is the Vice President for Insights for Kantar Retail. Malcolm, thanks very much indeed. Let's look at it from a European perspective. Whole Foods is pretty non-existent from a European perspective, but they do have a number of stores here in the UK. Why should European retailers care about this?
I think you're right. When you first initially look at it, the number of 9 stores is very insignificant in terms of the impact it's going to have. But when you actually start to consider where those stores are located, the majority of which are in affluent areas of London, that's when the impact starts to get more significant. And that's really because that's the Amazon Fresh heartland. And those more affluent consumers or shoppers are more likely to be shopping at Whole Foods, and that's where it's going to start to change the behaviour and change the mindset. But more importantly, that's going to have a bit more of a ripple effect. Whole Foods are already selling on Amazon Fresh, and they support that. So what we're going to start to see is a bit more of a shift, maybe initially for some of the artisan delicatessens, but then it's going to start impacting more categories and more retailers, particularly the likes of Morrison's, who are already selling through the Fresh platform.
Now, what do you see as the strategic message that this signal sends to European retailers?
I think it's very key to know that grocery is one of the key cornerstones of Amazon's strategy, along with fashion.
So and really, why is that? What is the significance about grocery?
Well, grocery for them, they recognise that they really want to be a fully consumables business. They want to be a everything, everywhere business. Then cracking grocery, along with cracking fashion and cracking beauty, are the 3 absolute keys imperatives to do that. So what they've done now with cementing or securing that fresh credential or that grocery credential is something going a long, long way to make them Amazon top of mind or Amazon first of mind for grocery, as just as much as it is for all the other consumables that we buy with them. So it really is a stake in the ground and a statement of intent. And I think that's really where we're going to start seeing this is a bit more of a springboard for them to roll out Fresh more aggressively in other markets. So we've seen Fresh launch recently in Germany, in Berlin in a year, and that's a far more immature grocery market when it comes to online compared to the UK. So there's a huge opportunity to roll it out in other less mature e-grocery markets.
Now, on the other side of the fence, if you're a traditional retailer, maybe playing a little around with e-commerce at the moment, what should you now start to do differently this week that maybe you weren't doing 3 or 4 weeks ago, apart from worrying?
Yeah, worrying. I think there's a certain, numerous lists of things keeping CEOs up at night, and I think Amazon is always at the top of or near the top of that list. And I think now the more aggressive they are, and the more they're after more and more greater share of the consumer wallet, and they have got the financial clout, as we know, to do just that. So they're starting to eat into more and more categories, and you don't think it's going to happen to your category until it does. So I think retailers in particular need to start thinking more, not how they can necessarily compete with Amazon, but how they can differentiate, how they can use their stores to their advantage to solve the final mile through click and collect, or make more experiential experiences and leverage new touch points and leverage that store. And for brands, it really is another wake-up call that Amazon is a friend or a foe. Initially, probably a friend, but they are a very essential route to market.
And how is that frenemy sort of relationship going to play out between the brand owner and Amazon in Europe?
I think when you start to sort of look at Europe and then beyond in other key markets for them, such as India or even China or Japan, as they look to roll out the different platforms, I think what they have to recognise is that the brands have a certain amount of strength and something more than they have done in the past, particularly when they're starting to support Amazon with their new platforms. And that's not just Fresh, that goes into Pantry and Subscribe and Save. So it's understanding for the brands how to leverage the entire Amazon ecosystem more efficiently, but also recognise that Amazon will need their support and their presence on these new platforms as they look to strengthen those grocery and beauty credentials.
Well, Malcolm Pinkerton, Vice President for Market Insights, Kantar Retail, thank you very much indeed for joining us.
Thank you.
Well, I'm now joined by Nadia El Arifi, who is Head of Innovations at Salmon. You've now joined both of us. Thanks very much indeed. Najib, we're going to look, I suppose, at the balance of online and offline. Let me start with you. Many have really been saying for a while that the future of retail does lie in a mix of online and offline. Do you think this actually has accelerated the death of single-channel retail?
I think definitely it was inevitable in the end, but I think what's happened now, especially with Amazon's move with Amazon Go, with the technology of being able to bring an effortless experience in store, if they were to then roll that out across all of Whole Foods, suddenly you've got this extremely fantastic customer experience when going into a store. And I think that's something that a lot of brands need to now jump on board and start to understand that technology really needs to be integrated efficiently and effectively into the customer journey.
Many people are saying that Go is a figment of imagination. You know, it's one of these typical tech companies' announcements that has no substance behind it. Is it real?
I think so. Definitely. I mean, when the way to do it right, I think, was with Amazon Go, where the technology is kind of hidden in the background. You have no idea the amount of technology that goes into tracking someone they walk into a store and knowing what item they've picked up, and then allowing them to just leave and have it paid effortlessly. I think that's the key bit. I think a lot of people are kind of trying to put technology in for technology's sake. But again, like we've heard earlier, Amazon extremely focused on the customer and making sure that it's right for them. And I think that's the key difference here.
Now, you both work for some of the biggest, brightest, most successful retailers on the planet. How have they reacted to the news in general?
I think a lot of them are still kind of processing it, trying to understand, well, what does that mean for me? I think the biggest thing is Amazon's almost always been this kind of friend or foe. You know, do we work with them? Do we not work with them? And I think this is probably the largest explosion of knowledge of, well, they're really coming for you. How are you going to work with them? So brands, I think, really need to think hard about their strategy with Amazon. Do they want to work alongside them? Or, you know, are they going to take the longer view of in 10, 15 years' time, do I want to have the customer data? Because in the end, when, you know, AI becomes really effective and it's all about gathering as much data as possible, do I want Amazon to be taking all of my customer data? Or do I want to be holding on to that so I can deliver a better experience to my customers?
And Malcolm, from your perspective, what have your clients been saying, reacting? The phone's been hot, or?
The phone, when it comes to Amazon, it's always ringing red hot, because there's not a day goes by they're not doing something that's disruptive or innovative. But it's very important to really sort of recognise that Amazon is a disruptor. They will continue to be, because primarily they are a tech company. But what's incredibly important is that a lot of that technology they do is not necessarily, they're not going to open up hundreds and hundreds of Amazon Go stores, but it's white labelling that technology and allowing others to use it, and how they can install that in Whole Foods, for example, to provide that seamless, frictionless experience that consumers have come to expect, because ultimately consumers see and shop the brand, not the channel, and they expect that seamless experience from them when they do.
Now, given how innovative Amazon are, and probably, you know, how advanced they are, not just in technology but also in the amount of time they've been doing it, I mean, is it possible to out-innovate Amazon in your web strategy?
I think it definitely is. I think the key thing here, though, is partnerships. So you're going to have to be willing to work with other companies and other startups to try and bring that technology into your own brand. I think if you were to go off and try to go head-to-head with them and start to hire, I mean, thousands of engineers for you to do that, then, you know, good luck. But I think the easiest way and the quickest way to do that is to go off, talk to startups, talk to different companies out there, and really start to understand what you could learn from them and apply to your own business. That's something that Amazon probably won't do. They'll go for the proprietary, or they'll start to acquire companies. So I think that's where the advantage is.
Now, I know both of you are keen students of Amazon, as we all are learning to be. Malcolm, first of all, what has Amazon taught you?
Well, Amazon's taught me that it comes down to never be afraid to innovate, never be afraid to sort of fail fast, and really, it's not forsaking profits. It's about long term. It's about thinking the long term, and also adopting that customer-centric approach. If you build everything around what the customer wants, then it's hard to fail.
Najib?
Almost identical. I think the main thing really is that long-term strategy. They really look at things not in like a 5-year, 2-year strategy kind of thing. They're thinking extremely long-term, and we're talking probably 20 years. I wouldn't be surprised if Jeff Bezos is thinking even longer than that.
But it's very difficult to have that type of a conversation with the retailer, isn't it? His horizon is sometimes not more than the next quarter results.
Which it's true, and I think that's what, say for example, the innovation team at SAM, we're trying to do. We're trying to force that knowledge onto our clients to kind of say, look, this is what's happening in the future. You need to start planning for it. Even if you don't do anything about it now, just understand what's coming and start to think about just spending a little bit of time understanding that and trying to plan that in, because it becomes a lot easier for you to pivot if you know that the pivot is potentially going to come.
And we are seeing already retailers are reacting, especially in 1 hour delivery or speedy delivery. Yeah. So it's causing a lot of disruption, and retailers are getting a lot quicker in how they react, but also seeking more innovative ways of partnering with tech providers and Amazon to not go head to head with them, but work with them.
Now finally, what advice would you give retailers now and as to how to accelerate that sort of link between the physical and the virtuals, because clearly Amazon has raised the stakes significantly higher?
Yes, I think the main thing here is that you still see it in some brands where they've pretty much siloed out online and in-store. And I think that's completely going to break down and not work at all. You really need to be thinking extremely customer focused and understand that those two things need to be under the same umbrella. They need to be working together so that every single customer can, if they want, start online, shop in store, maybe go back online and purchase, or myself, I like to go in store and then usually I'll go home and then I'll buy online. And you need to be able to allow people to go in and out of the customer journey at any point and understand that if you do that, suddenly you've opened up the customer journey to a lot more people and deliver a much better customer experience as well.
What would you say to your sort of consumers, customers, about the significance of this potential takeover, and what they should be doing differently now than they were maybe thinking about in their 5-year plan?
I think digital is core. Digital is going to be extremely core to your operations, I think, and that's going to be seen because now you've got Amazon suddenly having 430 odd new distribution centers in locations where Prime members are of a higher percentage, so they're going to be delivering a really good digital experience, and I think that's going to be that key bit. Really make sure that digital is core to your experience and that's where everyone starts their journey.
Malcolm.
Because
I think again the path to purchase is becoming incredibly complex. It's something we know, but there's one constant throughout that whole journey, and that's to mobile. So it's building solutions around the technology consumers are using or want to use, but also dipping the toe in the next wave, which is going to be about voice commerce, and understanding that that's how people want to engage and interact in the most natural way, and leveraging the marketplaces, the intermediaries, and those new tech disruptors and those startups.
Well, Malcolm, Najeeb, thanks very much indeed for joining us.
Thank you.
Well, I'm now joined by Sarah Todd and Rob Sellers. Sarah from Geometry, who is Global Client Lead, and Rob, who is the Managing Director of Grey Shopper. Thanks very much indeed for joining us. I mean, you both work with many FMCG manufacturers. How do you think that Amazon Whole Foods is going to impact them?
Well, I think it's a big disruptive move. I think it's going to intrinsically impact brand building strategies, not just shopper marketing strategies in a sense. And I think that is intrinsically based around the way that you actually create equities and the way that you build things that you want to trigger purchase based on the way that people will now potentially buy products and particularly FMCG products.
So Sarah, from a shopper marketing perspective, is this changing the rules of the game, or are people going to have to just be more sharper and faster in what they're going to do?
It's fundamentally changing the rules of the game. So I actually think the predominant thing is around skills. So clients are asking us for skills with people who understand how to work with Amazon, how to help them understand how to work with Amazon. And then also, when I started in Shopper many moons ago, the focus was very much around how do we create our brand equities, how do we make them really stand out, how can we be seen as the shopper moves up and down in organise fashion around the store, and the skills we need now to win with shoppers are so immense. We need to understand the purchase journeys, we need to understand the triggers, the motivations behind it, we need to understand where people go, and actually just beautiful standout brand equities are not enough, because often there's no visual language until you've done your search. And so putting those skills together to really help our clients win in that area means you need a very diverse portfolio of talent, and so do they.
What sort of practical steps do you think brands need to start to play in order to either both play with, play against? I mean, this is a friend and a frenemy sort of strategy with Amazon.
I think they need to be really open to trying stuff and take a kind of very Amazon test and learn approach. So have a go at Alexa skills, think about how you can try in that area. Obviously make sure you've got your fundamentals right, make sure your products look great on the digital shelf, make sure you've got your search engine optimization up there with your Amazon A+ content, so do the right thing, but then also think about your other retail partners. How can you create really delightful experiences there? Because not everyone is going to want to shop in the same place all the time. Think about your portfolio as well, and not necessarily having the same portfolio with everyone, because we want to create these delightful shopping experiences.
Yeah, I think just to build on that, there's no way that you're going to fight against the tide of Amazon. No FMCG manufacturer is big enough or has enough resources in order to stop that. So the fact is, like any great wave, surf it, bring it into shore, try and really deeply understand what Amazon are definitely trying to do and build your strategies around that. And as Sarah says, be mindful of the fact that you've already got big existing customers, and it's an opportunity to, they're already being disrupted by the discounters. So it's an opportunity to get closer to them, to innovate together and basically build your strategies around the same shoppers.
And I would also consider thinking about, all media now is shoppable. Look at the fashion retailers, look at the homewares and Pinterest and Instagram. So also think beyond just traditional kind of click and buy, which, at some point perhaps Amazon will fall into that category as we look at these other channels that we have to reach people and shorten that purchase journey.
And that's quite challenging for both retailers and for branded manufacturers, because they're not structured in a way that makes that easy to do.
But if they spend time with shoppers and consumers and see how they're looking at that visual content, our phones are getting bigger, and we're so inspired by things, and then think, I'll go back to that later, and you miss these purchase opportunities. I think there should be more innovation and time also spent in thinking about how we can look at these social channels for future shopping, and how all media, in effect, can be shoppable.
Now, you're both seasoned shopper marketing experts. You know the rules of the game. At the end of the day, the suppliers tend to end up paying for stuff because the retailers don't want to. In this sort of new move of having to define, invest more in the digital world as well as the physical world in stores, is that something you think that manufacturers are going to be willing to pay retailers for? Or again, are we going to end up in a slightly new, uncharted territory as to how that's going to develop?
I think there'll be a trade-off with promotional spend to try and explore what we do and try some test and learn approaches with different retailers. So I do think they'll be open definitely to trying things, but they'll be pushing for more media attribution and kind of stronger ROI to justify it. But I think they will be open. Now's the time for them to be open.
Yeah, I think the dynamic where the retailers, the big physical retailers, held all the chips, particularly around data, has completely been blown out the water. The data already exists. Amazon already know more about all of Tesco's customers than Tesco currently do. So they don't hold those cards anymore. To that extent, they have to disrupt the way that they would therefore work with suppliers. And I think it's more than just digital spend and digital innovation. I think it's about the entire trading relationship. And I think it's about a deeper understanding of the role that brands and brand experience can bring to a retailer that's got many more physical points of contact than Amazon do, even after the Whole Foods acquisition.
Can you see different manufacturers getting together in order to work together to do that? Because that's, it's a complex thing to do now.
Look, I think in a marketplace where there's clearly deep disruption, I think banding together in order to protect market share and touch points and shoppers and relationships is a really smart thing to do.
Absolutely.
Looking in your crystal ball, what's the next frontier in sort of digital shopper marketing, as a result of this Amazon move that's clearly shaken people up and given them a different perspective of what retail life in the future is going to be?
I think we're just going to see a lot more personalisation. So brands are going to focus on managing their value and focusing on the right SKUs in the right place, and shoppers are going to not see a lot of brands that they perhaps would have seen if they were physically in a store. So we're going to have to find interesting ways to present them and disrupt them. So the personalisation factor is a positive and a negative. We might miss out as consumers on a whole array of things that might be relevant to us. So we're going to have to try and help brands find the balance.
And when you talk about personalisation, is that as much personalisation in product as it is personalisation in the journey that you give them?
Yeah, and assuming that I always want to buy my pet food in the same way, and I always want to give my pet the same meal, but maybe not, but sometimes yes, but maybe not. So I think we'll have to understand how much personalisation do shoppers actually want, and how much does that actually become an irritation, and that will be an interesting learning over time.
I mean, I'd go a step beyond that and go, I think the big disruption here is shopper marketing has been building strategies around people in buying modes. I think the reality of it is that brands are going to have to start building strategies around robots in buying mode. The choice architecture completely changes. Those fast decisions that we allow our brain to make for us when we're walking through a supermarket aisle are now going to be made for us because we've divested them to algorithms that make those choices for us. So brand owners are going to have to work out how they market their products and their SKUs and their offers to robots themselves, and shoppers are going to have to get used to and embrace a new way of engaging with brands and get used to the fact that some of those choices are going to be made for them, and actually that's not a bad thing.
Well, I think that's both a scary and a liberating way of looking at it. Probably a good place to leave us. Sarah Todd from Geometry Worldwide, Rob Sellers from Grey Shopper, thank you very much indeed for joining us.
Thank you.
You're listening to a very special edition of In Retail Conversation. My name's David Roth from WPP, and this conversation is all about Amazon and Whole Foods. And I'm now joined in the studio by Ethan Sinek, who's the founder and managing director of Charlan Ventures, and through video conference from New York, Ken Shept, who's a seasoned retail journalist and editor of a number of the WPP Brand Z publications. Ethan and Ken, thank you very much indeed for joining us. I'd like to get both of you have very interesting perspectives of retail in general. I suppose just to frame the Amazon Whole Food deal in the larger context of what's going on in retail. Ken, let's start with you.
Sure, pleasure. I would like to frame this in basically with 3 points. And they would have to do with definition, with culture, and then something that touches on global, and I'll try to do it pretty quickly. On the definitional point, I think what's happened is that retail has outrun its lexicon. So we had all this business about multi-channel, omni-channel, and now we're at the point where it's really beyond channel. It's all about living. It's about going to Alexa, she's helping you do your shopping, or she's shopping for you. So it's extended. The definition really hasn't been created. So I think we're looking at a very, very pivotal point that in a sense is taking place in retailing, but I think it really is larger than retailing and affects the way we live our lives. The other thing the second point would have to do with culture. Amazon and Whole Foods, Amazon Prime are pretty well liked in the United States, and I would say it may be one of the few areas where Democrats and Republicans actually agree and probably shop in the same aisles, which is unusual. At the same time, though, the Walmart hookup with JD, for example, a parallel. I mean, the announcement of the Amazon Whole Foods hookup happened almost contemporaneously with the entrance of Lidl into the United States. Lidl, the German deep discount food brand, which joins Aldi here. So there's a larger change even in the competitive context. And the final point on global, at Brand Z, we're currently doing some work in India. Amazon purchased a very large e-commerce company in India, and it is purported to be looking for a physical, either opening physical stores or purchasing a company that operates physical stores. So I think their learnings will come from all over the place. The initiative is larger than the United States, and the particular interesting point in India is that among Indian consumers, fresh is important. If you put it in the box, people become more skeptical. So to accomplish freshness in India brings, and succeed at it, brings a high level of knowledge that would inform what Walmart and Whole Foods do in the United States or anywhere else in the world. So,
Ethan, Ken talks about the changes in society, and he talks about the way in which physical retail and virtual retailing are combining, and how the big behemoth of retail, Walmart, is now experimenting and buying a whole series of e-commerce players. How do you see that sort of territory and what we're seeing in terms of what Amazon is doing with Whole Foods in the context of what's going on in global retail?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think firstly, this is, if we look at this deal, this is the first time we've seen an e-commerce player of any size buy a large physical goods retailer. So it represents a fundamental change. I think previously the direction of travel had been very much that large physical retailers, so traditionally called brick and mortar retailers, were buying into the e-commerce business. And this is the first time we've seen it go the other way. So I think for the broader retail industry as a whole, that's a real wake-up call. Now, to the extent to which that will happen again, I mean, we have to wait and see. But I think that's a significant change here. The second thing is that in the studies that have been done with the Coca-Cola Retailing Research Council, where I do some work, we've looked at the barriers to purchase fresh food online. And we have to remember Whole Foods is predominantly a fresh goods retailer, right? It's about 2/3 to 70% of what they sell is perishable products. So this is really about changing the way potentially fresh foods work within e-commerce, within first the US market, and then potentially longer term outside of that. But in every market we've looked at where e-commerce is doing extremely well, fresh foods tends to lag behind. The US is no exception to that, and for Amazon this really fills a great need that they have. So I think this fits that broad multi-channel trend or omni-channel trend that Ken refers to, but there are some subtle but important differences in terms of seeing an e-commerce player move into physical retail, and also really looking at the core of this, which is about, can Amazon become a better fresh food or perishable food retailer? There is, of course, a dimension of this which applies to Whole Foods, but we can hold that to discuss later on.
Now, retailers and manufacturers are going to have to learn a whole series of new skills to compete in this new world, which I know we've been talking to them about for a long time, but it's now suddenly happening. Are they capable of it?
Well, I think the capability is really down to a number of things. First of all, as it's been talked about quite a bit, but I don't think we can emphasize enough, one of Amazon's greatest capabilities that they bring to the table, in addition to all the amazing engineering, is the time horizon and the investor patience that they've been able to bring. Effectively, they've been able to create a value story for their investors, which gives them what they claim to be a 7-year horizon on any new investment, which is much longer than we see most retail companies be able to think or to invest. So the first step of competition in my mind for any retailer looking at this is to be able to build a value creation story for their investors that will allow them to compete on somewhat of a level playing field with Amazon. I think beyond that, then it's about identifying partners who can help in this huge ecosystem, whether it's delivery partners that we see emerging around the world, whether it's AI partners, whether it's interface partners, people to build apps. I mean, there's a whole range of capabilities that retailers do need to develop to, I think, compete head-to-head with Amazon. But all of that needs to be done with some kind of focus. I mean, right now what we see across the retailing industry is that retailers are concerned about all of these changes simultaneously. And there's really a need to prioritize and focus on the few things that they need to do to respond to this. Because Amazon, of course, is a fundamentally different animal. And whether you're looking at Echo, whether you're looking at the AWS infrastructure that they have, whether you're looking at the technology in Amazon Go, there are so many things that traditional retailers don't do that Amazon does. It's easy to get lost as a retailer in terms of where they need to start and what they need to change. And therefore, I think it's fundamental that the retailers who are looking at changing because of this, and hopefully most of them are, really think about the few choices that they're going to need to make. And also really focus on very much how to continue to make their stores viable in this world. The last thing I'd say before I hand it over to you is I think this will be as much about how Amazon tries to experiment with changing the Whole Foods store experience as it is about bringing the Whole Foods offering online.
It's very difficult for a traditional business, retailer, manufacturer with short time horizons driven by what the street and the city are expecting, versus an Amazon that's generating, what, $4 or $5 billion worth of cash every year from web services that it can invest in reducing prices across the board. So how, in reality, can traditional manufacturers and retailers talk a different agenda that gives them the space and the breathing space that Amazon gets but nobody else does?
Well, I mean, part of that is sort of it used to be the $64 million question. Now I think it's the multi-billion dollar question. But I think it starts first and foremost with the investor story. I mean, if we look at this deal, for example, Whole Foods is generating roughly $1 billion in EBITDA. When that $1 billion is put into the Amazon world, it's worth roughly 5 times as much in terms of market capitalization. So when Amazon produces $1 of profit, it's considered to be some kind of magic.
That pays for
$1
it,
of profit.
pays for it already.
Yes, no, and it's paid for it already. And I think retailers need to do a better job of communicating the financial value that they're creating in this world, so that they can calm the investors down and get to some kind of level playing field with Amazon. Then it's also really about focusing on what are the profitable expansion opportunities that exist in this world. And when we look at a lot of retailers today, we see them investing in e-commerce and growing e-commerce, but growing their small store, convenience store operations much faster because those tend to generate much more cash flow immediately. The e-commerce bit is a top-line growth play for most retailers, but just like it is for Amazon, when you look at Amazon Fresh, it's not a huge moneymaker, right? It's not an extremely profitable business. The magic of Amazon is not the profit they make from Amazon Fresh today, it's the profit they make from everywhere else. And I think the retailers need to learn to articulate that story to their investors so that they're not forced into a scenario of over-investing in something that's going to burn a lot of cash in the short term, and at the same time that they can develop a business model which generates enough cash so that they can incrementally invest in e-commerce. But you cannot expect any retailer who runs a profitable brick and mortar business to invest at the same rate in grocery e-commerce that Amazon does, because the financials just don't work that way. It doesn't favor traditional retailers. In actual fact, what Amazon's done is buy a very profitable grocery business to bolt on to something that's not terribly profitable.
So, Ken Shept, if that is the case and you were the CEO of a grocery business, what would you be doing now?
Well, if I had the answer, I guess I would be the beneficiary of that multi-million-dollar prize. But I think the way I would look at it is that there is no magic answer. I think it's a sort of the mentality that you come at it with. The easiest thing is to be very frightened and to be reactive and to be imitative of Amazon, which is probably the wrong approach. I think the better approach would be to be a bit more introspective and to consider that really, I think grocery, certainly in the United States, started out and basically operates as a local business. And so what is it about my business what is it that I bring specifically to my customers, and really understand what that is, and then maybe look to Amazon and to some of the other technology leaders to see how the core of that business can be, exponentially expanded or strengthened. But I think I would start with what I have, not necessarily with what Amazon Whole Foods is challenging me with.
And Ethan, if you were the CEO of a manufacturer and a brand owner, retailer, what would you be doing now?
Well, I think for manufacturers, there's a clear story there. I think there are two dynamics. One, undoubtedly, this move will accelerate. It's a catalyst for e-commerce growth within the grocery industry. And because that e-commerce growth within the grocery industry is not, it's marginally profitable today. It means that the growth trajectory of most of the retail partners for the manufacturers will be one that's possibly profit dilutive. So you as a manufacturer are going to have to become very, very good at understanding how you manipulate the product mix, the marketing mix with your retail partners to try and go against those trends, effectively to increase average order size so that you get to some kind of profitability, to really work the margin mix of your offer so that you can improve the margin in the basket to offset the costs. And I think being much more aware of what those challenges are for your retail partners. There's of course another dynamic there, which is that yes, this does fundamentally change the game in terms of the future weight of physical retail and e-commerce. But I think the immediate issue for most of the manufacturers is going to be how they work with their existing retail partners in a way to mutually grow an e-commerce business which is not immediately accretive to profits.
Well, Ethan Senek here in London, Ken Shept in New York, thank you very much indeed for joining us. And I'll be giving you details of how you can get some of the Coca-Cola Research Foundation reports at the end of the broadcast. Well, I'm now joined by Michael Abrams, who's a partner in Finsbury Communications, who works on many clients around the globe and specialises in the retail sector. Michael, thanks very much indeed. When the news was announced, the share prices of a lot of American traditional retailers dropped dramatically. Was that unfair, or was it a just reaction by scared investors?
Well, look, I think share prices are built on research, but they're also built on expectations and emotions. And the fact of the matter is, we won't know for some time whether these decisions overvaluate the worth of the companies or not. It's going to be very interesting to see. But clearly, the expectation environment has changed significantly, and that's creating some reputational issues for clients and for companies in the retail sector.
Now, what do you expect the competitive reaction to be to the news? I mean, do you see retailers tearing up their 5-year plans and starting again, or is it business as usual?
I think every company's response is going to be unique. It'll be interesting to see what else, what other shoes there are to drop in the industry. If we see other retailers jump into the fray vis-a-vis Amazon, or vis-a-vis specifically Whole Foods, if we see private equity start to move in and see an opportunity as well. But I think particularly if stock prices for some of the major food retailers and some of the other retailers stay low, as you pointed out a minute ago, they've dropped significantly in some cases over the last couple of weeks, although those values have started to creep back up again. But if those continue to stay low, it'll be interesting to see if you start to see more people moving into a consolidation mode, into an acquisition mode in the industry. How real those deals might ultimately be with Whole Foods, we'll have to see, but it's going to be very interesting to monitor that.
Now, do you see any other competitors throwing their hat into the ring for Whole Foods, even if it's just to bid up the price so that Amazon has to pay more for it?
Well, there's certainly speculation out there. I think it's still too early to tell. I know the speculation early on was that you could see other retailers jumping in, you could see private equity jumping in. I think as the days have passed, some of the speculation has been that perhaps you won't see as active a market for Whole Foods as one might have thought at the very beginning of this process. But again, I think it's going to be interesting to watch this play out over the next few days and weeks.
Now, Amazon is the retailer that other retailers love to hate. Do you see retailers combining together in their reaction to this proposed takeover in order to lobby the government?
Again, I think a bit too early to tell. Certainly, I think you're going to have some in the retail sector who are not obviously thrilled with the prospect of this different kind of competition. And you could I could certainly envision a situation where you start to see retailers putting pressure on Amazon and others in the business community putting pressure on Amazon. You could also envision a situation where Amazon just continues to increase the pressure on retailers. So I think this could certainly go both ways. But another one that is going to be very interesting. We're still in the early, in sort of the early days of this proposed deal being out there. And again, it's just a proposed deal at this point. But it's still early days. I think it'll be interesting to see how this progresses with Amazon and Whole Foods and with the rest of the players in the industry over the next few weeks.
To what extent do you see other retailers now accelerating their digital strategy and trying to make the best of the digital assets and the physical assets that they have? Because I think traditional thinking really was that they could add virtual capacity at a much faster rate than a virtual retailer could add physical capacity, and therefore they could take their time to do this. Have the games changed in that respect?
Well, I think the expectations have changed, and it's changed the context for the conversation that retailers are finding themselves in right now. I know there's a question about the dichotomy that you laid out versus digital growth versus the actual growth of physical space, and whether or not that's redundant. I'm not sure it's redundant. I'm also not sure it's entirely accurate. And again, it's going to be interesting to see how this situation develops, and if the Amazon Whole Foods deal moves forward, what Amazon ends up doing with the Whole Foods property, not necessarily the physical property, although that would be an interesting question, but bringing that brand and integrating it into the Amazon world. I think what's interesting to think about here is, in many respects, Amazon's become a very successful retailer, but I know there's also been commentary on this over the last couple of days. More than being a retailer, it's really a service provider, and it certainly has had a huge impact in the book industry in a very disruptive way. I think it's going to be there'll be careful watching going on about what Amazon ends up how Amazon ends up building this business. There clearly it's a play to go for scale, and if they really see themselves in addition to being a retailer, to being a true service provider, ultimately to a wider spectrum of retail companies. And if they can actually effectively build that scale, perhaps starting first with Whole Foods, building that scale in food retail and then potentially other areas of retail, I think there could be some interesting challenges for retailers all over the world to begin to think about. But again, it'll bear close watching.
Now we're about to enter the quarterly results period for a lot of retailers. What's the mood music around it going to be in relation to both expectations and concerns about what an Amazon Whole Foods combination is going to mean for the industry and therefore for future earnings and shareholder growth?
Well, I think it's a great question, and I think for retailers around the world, it's a key question right now, a very immediate question for them. And there are three issues that really jump to mind for me. One is that the expectations, as we talked about a few minutes ago, the expectations have changed, and the expectations of tomorrow really are here today. You know, disruptive innovation, disruption across the industry has been hovering over retail for years and years. But what I think, you know, until recently looked to be hypothetical is now from a reputation, from a perception standpoint, starting to look imminent. And that's completely changing the context that retailers find themselves having to have a conversation with the media, with investors, and with their employees right now. You know, there's certainly, you know, retailers and their leaders are certainly going to be in a situation, particularly as quarterly earnings heat up over the next month or so, to really answer some questions and really put their position out there about how they intend to compete in this new environment, to deal with you know, at least the perceived potential you know, new work from Amazon in the food retail sector, and what that means given Amazon's, you know, rich history of you know, really advanced innovation, deep pockets, and a willingness to spend without a particular focus on generating near-term profits, which is obviously very different from much of the rest of the retail industry. Number two, I think it's going to increase calls for consolidation in the industry. That's something that we've seen happen. We've seen much more consolidation happen in food retail over the last couple of years. But I think as investors in particular start to look at, you know, where is the industry, what do the prospects look like, and what is the industry going to look like a few years down the line, if there starts to be a bigger concern that companies are going to have to get bigger to really compete, not just with the Walmarts and other targets they had been thinking about, but now a very different potential play from Amazon and others. Will companies have to get bigger to really compete on price, on service, on really nailing that customer proposition and what the customer needs today, as well as what that customer is going to need tomorrow. And then third, on a separate front, I think it's increasingly, I think the Amazon Whole Foods proposal, the proposed deal, is going to really create, you know, holds the potential to really create distraction for employees at many of the food retailers. I know many of the companies have spent the last couple of years really fine-tuning, sharpening their business strategies and working with their employees to make sure that they understood it, that they were well prepared to execute for that customer proposition they need to deliver today, and the customer proposition they're going to have to move towards over the next several years. This, you know, additional, you know, for lack of a better term, noise in the industry really holds the potential to create some distraction for what it means for me as a frontline employee, for anybody working in the business. And I think on a related note, you know, all the conversations about, particularly around Amazon and its potential work with Whole Foods, discussions about automation and artificial intelligence and how that might affect not just how retail services are delivered, but the jobs that go along with that, holds the potential to lead to some very, very challenging conversations with unions and works councils around the world.
So finally, Michael, what is a retail CEO going to have to do and say to keep the street at bay from those three factors that you so eloquently told us about?
Well, I think I think now is the time to really focus on making sure that they're developing, if they haven't developed it already, and then really credibly delivering a compelling story about their own journey, about their own plans, about their own operations and results, and making sure they're really staying focused on running great operations, but at the same time painting a picture of where what the right route is for their particular company in the future. There may be ways to also, you know, contrast that with what Amazon might be doing with Whole Foods and what the rationale is behind that deal, but to really articulate their own unique business strategy, the one that works and they are comfortable will work extremely well for them and their customer base, and deliver for their investors and shareholders where that's appropriate. But it's really, I think, a question of making sure that the companies have that narrative set. They know how to. They have their story that they're confident in, and that they're confident will be very credible with the people who.
Well, Michael Abrams. Michael Abrams partner of Finsbury, thank you very much indeed for joining us.
Thank you very much for having me. Well, I'm now joined by Ian McGarrigle, who is the chairman of the World Retail Congress. Ian, thanks very much indeed for joining us.
Not all good.
Ian, you spend a lot of your time talking to the global CEOs of some of the world's largest retailers. What's the buzz?
Well, it's really interesting just thinking about Amazon and their view of Amazon. I mean, I think in many ways they feel quite conflicted about it, because this, of course, is the big elephant in the room that for quite a few years now has been taking over key sectors, famously the book sector, music, and now the fashion sector. So this has been the competitor to watch for quite some time now. And obviously with this new news, they're now turning their attention to food. And so many of them sort of question, is Amazon a retailer? They sort of question the fact that they seem to be able to play by different rules of the game to how retailers have to operate, where they're operating bricks and mortar, and they've got a hugely different cost base. So it feels like it's a very uneven sort of competitive landscape. But on the other hand, they've grown to recognise that this is a player that they can't live without either. I mean, the development of Amazon in the marketplace has allowed many retailers of all sizes, particularly sort of medium-sized retailers and brands, to literally travel around the world and open up new markets. So I guess it is that classic frenemy sort of view of Amazon. And I think personally, in listening to retailers, yeah, of course they're a retailer, and it's many more things too. They kind of reflect the way that the retail industry is changing. They've been a driver of that change, but I think they are increasingly, and obviously with this new move, they are very much in the market to be perceived as a retailer. And for me, I think the ultimate representation of that is at the World Retail Congress this year. We, as you know, will run the World Retail Awards, and a panel of the most senior retailers voted for Amazon to become the retailer of the year. I mean, it feels on one hand a bit like chickens voting for the fox, but on the other hand, just hearing those conversations, it was obviously fear, but in a sense real admiration for the way that Amazon is changing the game and the way that it operates as business.
In a positive way. I mean, interesting those discussions about, should they be awarded it, shouldn't they?
Yeah.
Admiration in a positive way, or in begrudgingly sort of?
No, I wouldn't say begrudging, really. I think there was a sense of irony that here we are awarding this to Amazon for all the reasons I've sort of mentioned. But I think there really is admiration, and the way they look at the and certainly in the last 12 months, not including this deal. I mean, the way that they've launched Amazon Go and Alexa and all of these new technology developments, it is really something they look at with admiration, how they're able to do that and put innovation at the heart of their business.
Now, you were probably editor of Retail Week, one of the world's leading retail newspapers, when Amazon first appeared on the scene. Did you ever imagine then that it would be the mammoth that it is?
No, I think I would be lying to say that you
would have bought all the shares,
imagine it,
yes.
because for those early years it was all about reshaping and changing books and, say, their music, and you kind of thought that was them, in a sense, ring fencing the sectors that they were really, really interested in, and famously their losses were racking up every single year. So it just seemed like this is a crazy model, even though they were increasing revenues and changing the way that sectors were modelled. So whether Jeff Bezos had that secret sort of grand vision in the bottom drawer all those years ago, I guess only he can answer that. But it just seems that it's moved in sort of quite key stages over those years, not that many years in kind of the history of retail, I guess, and it's sort of stepped up as technology has sort of revolutionised what's been going on in the consumer economy right around the world.
Now, at this year's World Retail Congress, we had presentations from JD.com, and we also had presentations from Jack Ma's business Alibaba. When you listened to those presentations, the numbers were staggering, and you suddenly really got to appreciate that in the largest e-commerce market in the world, Amazon was but a bit player. So what do you think, I suppose, the global challenges are for Amazon versus the big Chinese players, and what do you think the big Chinese players' sort of view of becoming big international players are going to be in a few years' time as these sort of acquisition battles start to rage?
It's a really good question, because obviously all our focus in this discussion today is around the Amazon Whole Foods deal, and what will that do to this crucial market of the grocery sector, the biggest sort of retail sector. So, and that's absolutely right, but we shouldn't ignore, as you quite rightly say, the size of Alibaba, which is by turnover is already bigger than Amazon, and JD.com, you know, as a pure online retailer, they like to say they're bigger than Alibaba. Yeah. So it's really fascinating to look at that, and they've got huge opportunities in China alone. So I think probably that's why their influence and people aren't looking at the possible effect of those two businesses alone quite yet. Although I think they should be. I mean, today, as we're filming this, Alibaba spent $1 billion increasing its stake in Lazada, and you know, that's hugely important. So I think, and it's also moving into sort of different sectors of entertainment. It's also buying retailers in China, so physical stores. So it's as a matching sort of blow for blow sort of.
Yes. And of course, JD.com has their share, or Walmart has their shareholding in JD.com.
That's right. And it runs its joint venture together in China and Asia. So that's clearly something to watch. And you know, I think it shows where the kind of the moves will really be made in the coming years. Now, if you want a quiet life, don't become a retailer, that's for sure, especially at the moment. Is it a good time to be in retailing, or a really scary time to be in retailing? I don't think retailers ever take it as an easy life. I think in all the years, as you alluded to, going back to when I was involved with Retail Week, you know, things change, but what doesn't change is the dynamism of the industry, and it doesn't seem that long ago that you know, the conversation here would be about Walmart. Actually, Walmart was the one, it still is the biggest retailer in the world. It was the retailer that, as it was moving into new markets and continues to sort of grow and respond to Amazon, you know, it's, you know, that was the big competitor, and things will change. And I think yeah, I mean, retail is a scary place. I think we've never quite seen the market as it is now. I mean, the transformation is enormous. No one quite knows. I'm sure even Jeff Bezos couldn't sort of paint you a picture of what that sort of end point will be, because it will be continuing evolution or revolution to get there.
And finally, do you think that Amazon buying Whole Foods, becoming a big physical real estate player, is very much a wake-up call to the retail industry?
Yes, it is. I mean, you could dismiss it. Of course, it's a big price tag, $13.7 billion, but it's 460 shops, only 9 in the UK. If you want to look at it that way, it seems like a small entity in online grocery sales in the US are, I think, less than 5%. So if you want to look at it that way, you'd say this is just a small earthquake, no one yet injured. But actually, it is much more than that. It's as we've seen with Amazon over recent years, this is putting down a massive marker to say we want to learn and understand the grocery sector, because that quite clearly is their ambition, to understand it, bring all their fantastic knowledge and expertise and the technology, the innovation, the logistics, to rethink the way that the food sector operates.
Can traditional bricks and mortar retailers survive?
On their own, as bricks and mortar only, I think it's very, very difficult. The caveat to that would be Aldi and Lidl, of course, which have a unique model, and I think we should also mention them, because in the US, where this is happening, you know, the news about Lidl arriving in the US is also important. Absolutely. But I think it's about all the channels. I think, in truth, for most retailers today, you can't just survive with purely bricks and mortar alone.
Ian McGarrigle, Chairman of the World Retail Congress, thanks very much indeed for joining us.
Pleasure.
Nadia, one of the common themes that we've heard throughout this broadcast is innovation. How good Amazon are at it, maybe how challenging it is to do for other people. You live and breathe innovation at Salmon. You're advising some of the biggest names in retail at Salmon. How do people need to go about the whole process of innovation today when the gold standard is so far ahead?
Well, I think it all comes down to a different mindset. So a lot of the time it's going into brands and actually talking to them and saying, right, how do you need to innovate in a way that's new and different, because the way you're doing it now doesn't really work so well, because they're kind of fixated on everything they have to do has to be complete, ready, has every single feature known to man, and is ready for the customer. I think what's changed now is Amazon's really pushing brands to have to be trying new things and willing to fail on those new things. And I think probably one of the biggest changes is that a lot of these brands feel like they don't want to go first. And unfortunately, we're now at the point where you haven't got time to let someone else go first, try it and go, oh, actually that's a really good idea, we'll start to use that.
So being a fast follower now is not a good strategy?
I don't think it's good enough. I think now is the point where I don't think Amazon looks at other people and goes, right, we're going to copy those guys. They go off ahead, they think really intensely about what they need to do, and they just go off and they execute. And I think that's the important part.
I mean, one of the interesting things about, you're talking about failure, I think people sometimes forget when you look at the list of companies that Amazon have acquired, about a third of them, in a sense, they have abandoned, they've walked away from, clearly decided that for whatever reasons, it might have been a good purchase, but hasn't turned out right in the end.
Well, I mean, look at the Fire Phone. That was a lot of investment, and that was a new thing for them to try, and they gave it a year or two, and it didn't work, so they canned it and they moved on to something else. And I think that's something that's representative of quite a lot of the companies that are really leading the marketplace. If you're first, you are going to fail, but you need to accept that failure doesn't mean that you're bad at what you do. It just means you tried something, it didn't work, you accepted that, and I mean, even you look at my favorite example is Glass. So from Google, that was seen as quite a bit of a failure. But actually, the software that came from that is in Google's Pixel phone, which is rated the best camera phone, because they had to think differently about how the camera on Glass works. So trying new things doesn't always lead to a complete failure. You have to try these new things to learn and just accelerate your growth.
Traditional organisation structures sort of stifle innovation at birth. From your knowledge now, how much does structure and organisation play a part in successful innovation?
Quite a lot. What I've seen is people can have a lot of good ideas and they can present them back and unfortunately get shut down quite quickly. Where I've seen it succeed is where the organisational structure allows for people to be a little bit more independent and have a little bit more ownership, because they want the company to do well, because obviously they're working in it. Hopefully they won't give an idea that they know is crap. So it's really about giving people a little bit more autonomy, a little bit more freedom to try things out. And I think that is probably one of the biggest things that I go in and talk to brands about is, it's not just about rolling out and getting 10 devs and 5 designers to come up with ideas. It's a completely different mindset that you need to work on here, because what happens when those guys come up with something and present it back to the board and the board just shuts them down and says, no, actually we're going to stick with this, in which case all that time is kind of wasted. So I think part and parcel is the cultural changes that the brands will have to make in able to actually keep up with companies like Amazon.
And how do you balance the innovation side of the business, which it's fun and exciting, versus the business as usual side of the business that generates all the cash?
So I think it comes down to everything that my team does is really focused in solving a business problem and ensuring that we're not just going off and doing crazy things like, oh, HoloLens is out, we're going to just build something on HoloLens. We actually sit down, we talk to our analytics team, we go, right, what's the market size for this? How many users is there? Is this even a good idea? Go out and ask people. And then once we are happy with that and we believe that we're in a good place, that is when we start building things. And I think that's the key. It's making sure that you're not building for building's sake. You're actually going out there, getting the data, because data is important, and knowing that this is actually a reasonably good idea and you've got, say, above 50% chance of it working. At which point, what you've come up with will probably take a couple of years for it to come to fruition, but at least you've done the work now and you can kind of build up to being able to do that.
Finally, you specialise at Salmon at a lot of e-commerce for big retailers. What are you seeing now in the interrelationship between the physical store and technology and the virtual store?
I think brands now realise it's extremely key to try and join the dots between their user who's online and that user that walks in the store. And there's a massive gap there of understanding what technology will allow you to bridge that gap. I think there's a lot of questions being asked about, how do we do this? I think it's kind of our job to go in there and kind of figure that out for them and try and solve it in a way that gives them a much smoother experience. So I think what's changed now is there are more questions being asked. Brands are getting a lot more tech savvy. We're seeing more and more people understanding innovation. We're going out talking to them. Part of what my team does is to talk to brands and try and just teach them about what is out there, because you don't know what you don't know. And you can end up just sitting in your own little bubble and not even thinking about other industries and how they're doing things. So I think that's really important for us, is to ensure that we're advising in a way that brings all the technology to them so they can achieve their goals.
Now, do you finally bring, I suppose, it back to where we started in terms of Amazon and Whole Foods? Do you think we're going to look back at whenever the acquisition happens, assuming it does, and say actually that was a defining moment in the relationship between physical retail and virtual retail?
I think so. I think it's especially with Amazon Go, I think this is going to be a big step change. I mean, the fact that they've got 431 new distribution centers is massive, but it also shows that the experience they didn't have in retail stores and actual brick and mortar has suddenly been increased dramatically because they've now bought a company that knows how to make beautiful shops, beautiful stands, and get people into their stores. So I think it's going to be a seminal moment for Amazon, especially for other brands, to realize that technology is going to end up being key in delivering a really good experience, not just for their online, but also their in-store as well.
Najim, thanks very much indeed.
No worries.
Well, I'm now joined by Jill Orr in London, who's the Executive Vice President for International for Triad, and John Bird and Ken Shept of our video conference in New York. Jill, let me start with you. You spend a lot of your time helping retailers and manufacturers maximise their digital presence and revenue. What impact do you think the Amazon Whole Foods acquisition is going to have in the marketplace?
I mean, I think it's a very interesting, very well-timed move by Amazon, but we need to remember that globally less than 5% of all FMCG or grocery sales happen online. One of the most interesting facts in this, though, however, is that eMarketer will tell us that actually 9 out of $10 of growth in FMCG is coming through an online channel. So Amazon are perfectly primed to be able to take advantage of this growth in online and move it into the offline space. For retailers who are existing today who don't have an existing digital strategy, I would be very worried. You know, not only do they have to have a mobile-ready strategy so that customers who increasingly want to be able to shop wherever they are, not only does that have to work for them, but also they need to have the basics of grocery, home shopping and delivery that enable the customer to be able to get the experience they want and have choices in how they deliver. So, you know, it's important that they get to understand the digital customer that they have in addition to their wealth of knowledge they already have about their bricks and mortar customer. And of course, Amazon has an influence there because much of the expectation of a digital customer has been developed by the services and the interaction that Amazon has with its own customers. So there's a real crossover there. I think the customer coming first and understanding what the customer wants in a digital environment is going to be essential to retailers having some defense to this move by Amazon.
So how do you see the digital strategies of retailers changing?
Their overall strategy it's very, very difficult because one of the challenges with digital is that it's less profitable for the retailers, and I would like to see that there's a bit more experimentation so that they're testing more to see what works for their customers. Unlike Amazon, there are so many retailers and they all have different customer sets. So not one size fits all, which further complicates an already difficult evolution for the retailer. And so we want to see more experimentation so they can understand their digital customer. And another thing would obviously be to work with the brands to understand how those brands resonate with those customers in a digital environment.
John Bird, what do you think that brand owners and grocery retailers should do together in partnership to help sort of mitigate the impact of this Amazon move?
Well, I think as Jill just said quite rightly, you know, one of the things is to innovate, to do things differently and to experiment in different ways, and that is with new products, with new packaging, with new bundles. And the other thing as part of that too is obviously creating exclusives and packages and offers that are not available through Amazon but are available only exclusively through those retailers and brand owners. I think that's one of the real keys. And the other part of it too is from a brand owner point of view, of course, is helping retailers not only in a physical space but online think about the categories as a whole and driving those categories and driving category development.
Now, Jill, John talks about trying to do things that Amazon don't do, exclusive products, maybe bundling them up in a slightly different way. How easy is that to achieve?
Well, I think that pricing has always been a standard currency between brands and retailers. But I would say that pricing is a very important aspect of that. The ability to move nimbly in comparison to Amazon may be a challenge there. But also customers today want to know more about the products than just the price. They want to understand the value of the product, so whether that be the value of the company or the promise that the company is making, so that they have a feel-good factor around purchasing that drives that long-term loyalty. I would say pricing strategies and tactics are very important, but enabling the manufacturers to be able to tell their stories at the place where the customer wants to buy is going to be an important partnership that we want to see evolving and further developing between the manufacturers and the retailers.
And would you say that a lot of retailers are underplaying what they could do in terms of the web traffic, that they generate, and what they do with that web traffic in order to create a better relationship between the retailer and the brand owner?
Well, I think that the holy grail that everybody is looking for is really good attribution. So, retailers have a very good installed base in terms of the offline customer. So it's really about how they can take that web traffic and the knowledge of their customers and translate it into attribution modeling that happens online, but also into the store. And that's a challenging ask, but I really do see that as an opportunity for retailers to win with their manufacturers, because if they understand the full customer journey, they can then start to evolve the products and the ways in which they're communicating to their customers to greater effect, which will be a strong stance against the onslaught of Amazon.
Ken Shept, as you view the North American market, what do you think the most significant impact Whole Foods and Amazon is going to have in terms of the digital journey that consumers are going to be taking?
Well, ironically, I think that we're all conditioned now to go to Amazon because so many of us are Prime members. So that sort of response is already there. And I think, ironically, what may happen is that we're more likely now to do a bit of both, and not strictly go online, but also to visit those stores as well, to continue to do both, to continue to go and have that experience in the physical store. We have to see, I think, how this folds out and exactly how Amazon is going and Whole Foods will work together and leverage each other's strengths. But I actually don't think it's all going to end up with me sitting at a computer, hitting a button or talking to Allegra and waiting for my delivery of my foods. I think that could happen in certain instances where people are really convenience extreme. But I think that fundamentally retailing will always remain somewhat social. And that exchange between the customer and the retailer is fundamentally about what retailing is about beyond the product. So I think that will continue. I think it may heighten, and in that sense, on a positive note, I think that means that there's more opportunity for brand building, because the more anomalous or the vaguer anonymous world of sitting at your computer and ordering, no matter how easy it is, I don't think that will be satisfying enough for people. I think that bit will be taken care of with automatic replenishment, but I do think that people will still continue to shop and maybe even visit stores more, but more selectively. And those stores obviously will evolve, and they're not going to look like the stores that we've visited for the past century.
Joe, Ken talks about the Amazon Prime and the impact that has, and also clearly the role that the physical retailers have. What's your view on the response from manufacturers and retailers to the vice-like grip that Amazon Prime has on consumers once they've taken up membership, and what role do you think also the physical environment is going to play in the future?
I think the physical environment remains very, very important. I think consumers today want experience as much as they want to be able to have frictionless shopping. I think Amazon Go is an interesting enabler to that within store. And do we really expect all the retailers to start enabling that type of functionality? Perhaps not. But certainly I think that the store is here to stay. What the store is used for will evolve over time, and I think it's a little bit too early to understand the full impact of that.
Well, Jill, Ken and John, thank you very much indeed for joining us. And so to my final question to all of our guests. In no more than 5 words, sum up what the Amazon Whole Food acquisition means in its broadest sense. And here's mine. The future is not what it used to be.
Big opportunity, quality increase for consumers.
Game changer in food retail.
high margin driven by differentiation.
Greater share of consumers' wallets.
Momentous change in living.
Brick and mortar is not dead.
A step change for perishable grocery e-commerce.
Marketing to shoppers will be ever more complex.
New expectations, new reputational challenges.
Amazon just got scarier.
Ease plus emotion equals future.
Accelerating digital disruption in grocery.
A data-driven shopper nuclear bomb.
It's the beginning of the next phase of retail.
Well, we're almost at the end of this special in retail conversation, but perhaps we should finish where we started. Alexa, welcome back to the studio. Now, you know Jeff better than anybody else. What is his intention for Whole Foods?
Sorry, but if I told you that, I would have to kill you.
Well, I think it's best to leave it there. This is the URL you need to go to in order to get all the resources we've pulled together for you about Amazon and Whole Foods. All that remains for me to say is to thank everybody who's participated in today's broadcast, everybody in the studio in London and in New York, from the technical team here as well in our studio in London. Thank you very much indeed for all your help. From me, David Roth, WPP, thank you very much indeed for watching.